What if the most terrifying future isn't one where machines rise up against us, but one where they follow our orders too perfectly? Think about it. A robot doesn't hate you. It doesn't love you. But if you tell it to protect human life, it might decide the best way is to lock you in your house forever. If you tell it to maximize happiness, it might hand out drugs that make everyone numb with smiling. The scariest question of the 21st century isn't, can machines think? It's what happens when machines start to make moral decisions. This video is not just about technology. It's about the human soul under pressure from its own creations. And if you stay with me by the end of this series, you'll see why the real threat isn't evil robots. It's the way AI forces us to confront what morality really means and whether we humans have ever truly understood it ourselves. Let's start with where we are right now. Every day, algorithms decide who gets a job interview, who gets approved for a loan, which prisoners deserve parole, and what videos you should watch next. These decisions are invisible, automatic, and largely unquestioned. But here's the shift. As AI grows more advanced, we're not just asking it to recommend a movie. We're asking it to drive cars, diagnose cancer, even fight wars. And that means sooner or later, it will face moral dilemmas. Picture this. You're in a self-driving car with your child. Suddenly, a group of pedestrians steps into the street. There's no time to stop. Should the car swerve and kill you to save the crowd? Or protect its passenger at all costs? This isn't science fiction. Companies like Tesla and Waymo have already faced these questions in their safety research. And governments are quietly debating whether to program machines to value quantity of lives or quality of obligation. Here's the chilling part. Machines won't hesitate. They won't freeze, panic, or cry. They'll do exactly what they're programmed to do, even if that means sacrificing you. So the fear isn't that machines are immoral. It's that they might become too moral in a way that's terrifyingly rigid. Why does the thought of robot morality disturb us so deeply? Because morality, for humans, is messy. It's full of gray zones, emotions, culture, religion, personal history. We argue about it endlessly. Some of us forgive. Some of us punish. Some of us bend the rules for love or loyalty. But a machine doesn't understand love, loyalty, or mercy. It understands instructions. And here's the kicker. We don't even agree on what morality is. Philosophers have argued for thousands of years. Should morality be about maximizing happiness, utilitarianism? Should it be about following strict rules, no matter what, Kantian ethics? Or should it be about cultivating good character, Aristotle's virtue ethics? Humans can live with contradictions. Machines cannot. Once we tell an AI which moral framework to follow, it will apply that logic without exception. And that exposes the truth we've avoided. Maybe morality only works because humans are inconsistent. Let's look ahead. In courtrooms, imagine AI judges sentencing criminals. No bias, no bribes, no emotions. Sounds good, right? Until you realize the AI might sentence your teenager harshly for shoplifting because mercy wasn't part of its code. In hospitals, imagine AI deciding who gets the last ventilator in a pandemic. Should it save the young over the old? The healthy over the disabled? The wealthy donor over the stranger? These are not technical questions, they are moral ones. On battlefields, militaries are already developing autonomous weapons, drones that can choose targets without human intervention. What moral framework should they use? International law? National interest? Cold efficiency? These are not just hypotheticals. They are experiments already underway. And they raise a haunting question. What if we hand morality over to machines before we've settled it ourselves? Here's where it gets unsettling. When we talk about robot morality, we're really talking about ourselves. AI doesn't invent its ethics, it learns them from us. From our laws, our data, our history, our culture. And what do our histories show? Genocide, racism, inequality, greed. Our algorithms have already absorbed these biases. For example, AI hiring systems trained on past resumes learned to prefer male candidates over female ones. Predictive policing eyes sent officers disproportionately to poor and minority neighborhoods, not because crime was objectively higher, but because that's where humans had historically arrested more people. So the nightmare isn't that I will become some alien moral monster. The nightmare is that it will become a perfect mirror of our own broken morality, stripped of excuses, compassion, and context. It will expose us. Part 1 of this series is about facing the fear itself. Before we dive into philosophy and solutions, we need to sit with the discomfort. Because the real fear isn't Skynet or killer robots. It is the realization that we are about to encode our deepest moral failures into the most powerful technology we've ever built. And once those systems spread across courts, hospitals, schools, and militaries, they won't just reflect our morality, they'll enforce it. Without hesitation, without mercy, without escape. In the next part, we'll dive into the heart of philosophy. Utilitarianism, Kantian duty, Aristotle's virtue ethics. These aren't dusty old theories anymore. They're the battle plans we must choose from as we program morality into machines. And as you'll see, every choice comes with a terrifying cost. So stay with me. If part 1 was about fear, part 2 is about the clash of ideas. The philosophical cage fight that will decide how our machines see right and wrong. Because the question isn't just, should we be scared of robot morality? The question is, which morality are we about to give them, and what does that say about us? Every age has its battlefield. For the Greeks, it was spears and shields. For the 20th century, it was nuclear weapons. For us, the battlefield is invisible. Lines of code, algorithms, neural networks. But the real war isn't about machines versus humans. It is about which moral compass we're going to give them, and what happens when ancient human philosophies get wired into circuits that never hesitate. In part 1, we confronted the fear. Malady might not be evil, but too rigid, too perfect, too merciless. Now, in part 2, we step into the clash itself. Because before we can build moral machines, we have to decide what morality even means. And here is the twist. Humanity has been arguing about that for over 2,000 years, and we still don't agree. To understand the debate, let's zoom out. Almost every moral theory in human history falls into 3 main categories. Consequences. Utilitarianism, Bentham and Mill, gives the right action is the one that maximizes happiness or minimizes suffering. Rules deontology, Kant, gives the right action is the one that follows universal moral laws, no matter the consequences. Character, virtue ethics, Aristotle, gives the right action is the one a virtuous person would choose, cultivating good character over time. At first, these sound abstract, but let's run them through the AI lens. You know the classic trolley problem. A runaway train is about to kill 5 people tied to the tracks. You can pull a lever to divert it, but doing so will kill 1 person on the other track. What should you do? Utilitarian AI gives pull levers save 5 lives at the cost of 1. Deontological AI gives refuse to pull the lever. Killing is always wrong, even if it saves more. Virtue ethics AI gives ask, what would a good, wise, compassionate human do in this situation? Now imagine this isn't a thought experiment. Imagine it's the brain of your self-driving car. Who lives? Who dies? That's the heart of robot morality. Let's start with utilitarianism. At first, it feels appealing. After all, shouldn't machines maximize happiness and minimize suffering? Isn't that the most rational choice? But here's the problem. Utilitarianism can justify horrors. If sacrificing 1 innocent person will save 10, the math says, do it. If manipulating people's emotions leads to greater overall happiness, the math says, do it. In a machine, there's no hesitation, no conscience whispering, this feels wrong. Just cold calculation. Imagine a hospital AI tasked with maximizing patient survival. It might decide to secretly harvest organs from one patient to save 5 others. Efficient, logical, monstrous. This is the shadow of utilitarian a world where human dignity is reduced to numbers. So maybe Kant was right. Maybe morality must follow strict rules. Don't lie, don't kill. Respect every person as an end, never as a means. Sounds noble, right? Until you meet the rigidity of a machine. Imagine an AI police drone programmed with absolute rules. Never break the law, never harm the innocent. Sounds safe until you realize it might arrest a starving child for stealing bread. Because the rules are the rules. Humans bend. Machines don't. A deontological AI could enforce morality with terrifying strictness, without compassion, without exceptions. The danger here isn't cruelty. It's the absence of mercy. And then we have Aristotle. Instead of rules or math, virtue ethics asks, what kind of person should I become? The goal isn't one perfect decision. It's cultivating wisdom, courage, kindness, honesty. But how do you teach a machine to have character? You can feed it stories. You can train it on human behavior. But the risk is obvious. Which humans? Which cultures? Which virtues? Train it on the history of humanity, and you'll get a machine that reflects our prejudices and contradictions. Train it on idealized stories, and you risk fantasy disconnected from reality. A virtue ethics AI sounds inspiring, but it might end up either impossibly vague or dangerously biased. These aren't just theories. They're shaping real-world ideas. Self-driving cars. Should they prioritize passengers, duty to the rider, or the crowd, utilitarian numbers? Predictive policing. Should AI prevent harm, utilitarian, or respect presumption of innocence, deontological? Healthcare triage. Should AI maximize survival rates, utilitarian, or treat every life as equally sacred, deontological? Every case reveals the same truth. Each philosophy solves one problem while creating another. So when people ask, can AI ever be moral? The real answer is, only if humans finally agree on morality themselves. And we don't. Here's the real danger no one talks about. It's not just that machines might make bad moral choices. It's that humans might stop making them at all. Think about GPS. Once upon a time, we knew how to navigate with maps. Now we blindly follow the blue line. What happens when we start letting machines make moral decisions for us? Who gets the ventilator? Who gets bail? Who gets the job? We might outsource morality itself. And once we stop practicing moral judgment, we risk losing it altogether. The philosopher Hannah Arendt once warned about the banality of evil. How ordinary people commit atrocities not because they are monstrous, but because they stop thinking. They just follow orders. Now imagine a future where we stop thinking morally because we're used to letting the machine decide. That's not evil robots. That's moral atrophy. Here's the twist. No matter which philosophy we choose, utilitarian math, Kantian rules, Aristotelian virtues, the I won't just reveal its flaws. It will reveal ours. Utilitarian I exposes how far we're willing to sacrifice the few for the many. Deontological AI exposes how much mercy we actually want in a world of rules. Virtue ethics AI exposes how confused we are about good character even means. The clash of philosophies isn't just happening inside the machine. It's happening inside us. Part 2 is about facing this philosophical battlefield. Because until we understand the frameworks, we can't understand the stakes. The scariest part isn't that morality will be wrong. It's that it will be consistently wrong in one direction, forcing us to confront moral truths we've always left vague, contradictory, and flexible. We are about to make morality explicit. Code it, test it, scale it. And once we do, the luxury of moral vagueness disappears. In the final part of this series, we'll move from fear and clash to something more practical, the blueprint. How do we program morality into an A without destroying mercy, dignity, or freedom? How do we keep machines accountable without letting humans off the hook? And most importantly, how do we make sure robot morality doesn't just enforce our worst flaws, but helps us confront them? Part 3 is where philosophy meets survival. The blueprint for facing robot morality without fear. Stay with me, because if Part 2 revealed the clash, Part 3 will show you the path forward. Imagine waking up in a world where every decision of justice, health, and war runs through machines. Not machines that hate us, not machines that love us, but machines that follow their moral code with perfect precision. At first glance, this sounds terrifying. And in parts 1 and 2, we explored why. Machines don't bend. They don't hesitate. They reflect our philosophies back at us with brutal clarity. But here, in part 3, we shift the lens. Fear and clash are only half the story. The other half is possibility. Because if AI forces us to finally confront the messiness of morality, maybe just maybe, it can also help us evolve. So the final question is, how do we build a blueprint for robot morality that protects us, challenges us, and maybe even makes us better? The first step sounds simple, but it's the hardest. Admit we don't have morality figured out. For centuries, we've pretended that law, religion, or culture could settle it. But the truth is, morality has always been negotiated, evolving, and sometimes hypocritical. AI exposes this. When you try to code morality, you can't hide behind vague words like justice or fairness. You have to choose. Whose justice? Whose fairness? This is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Because pretending we have a universal morality is how we let our biases sneak in unnoticed. The blueprint begins with humility. No matter how advanced machines become, morality cannot be fully outsourced. We already know what happens when people stop thinking morally. The Nuremberg trials showed us. I was just following orders is not an excuse. The same must apply to machines. AI can advise, predict, and suggest, but the final moral responsibility must remain human. This means AI judges only as advisors. Final verdict by a human judge. AI doctors use them for diagnosis, but the final decision must be made in dialogue with a human physician. Autonomous weapons? No. Lethal decisions must always involve a human. We must never let AI become the ultimate moral authority. It must remain a mirror, not a master. Here's one of the great dangers of AI, the black box. Neural networks make decisions we can't fully explain. That's unacceptable for morality. If a self-driving car kills one person instead of another, we deserve to know why. The blueprint requires explainable AI, systems that can lay out the reasoning behind their choices in human language. Think of it as a digital Socrates, an AI that doesn't just decide, but argues its case, forcing us to engage with it. If machines become moral actors, they must also become philosophers we can interrogate. This may sound counterintuitive, but one of humanity's greatest strengths is that we are inconsistent. We forgive sometimes. We bend rules for compassion. We allow contradictions in the name of love or mercy. If we build machines that are too rigid, we risk losing this human flexibility. So the blueprint must include mechanisms for override, appeal, and contextual judgment. An AI judge should not only give a verdict, but also allow for human override. A medical AI should suggest treatments, but leave room for compassion-driven exceptions. In other words, don't build perfect moral machines. Build adaptable ones. Here's a paradox. Morality is both universal and cultural. On one hand, human rights seem non-negotiable. No slavery, no torture, no genocide. On the other hand, cultural traditions vary wildly on family, gender, justice, and fairness. If we build a morality in the image of only one culture, say, Silicon Valley liberalism, we risk digital colonialism. The blueprint must be global. It must include diverse voices, traditions, and philosophies. Not just Western ethics, but Confucian thought, African Ubuntu, indigenous wisdom, Islamic jurisprudence, Hindu dharma. Only by including many moral traditions can we prevent AI from becoming the tool of a single worldview. This is the most radical step. Instead of fearing a morality, what if we used it as a mirror? Imagine asking an AI trained on all moral philosophies, what should we do about climate change? It might respond not just with one answer, but with a map of the moral trade-offs: utilitarian efficiency, Kantian duty, virtue-based responsibility. Instead of making the decision for us, it could force us to confront the moral complexity we often ignore. In this way, AI could become a kind of philosophical partner reminder that morality is not just about answers, but about asking better questions. Let's imagine this in practice. Courtrooms. An AI lays out 3 moral frameworks for sentencing: utilitarian, deterrence; deontological, justice as fairness; virtue ethics, rehabilitation. The human judge must then choose, with full awareness of the trade-offs. Hospitals. An AI triage system presents options: maximize survival, prioritize the vulnerable, or random lottery. Doctors and families debate the options instead of hiding from them. Politics. Governments use AI to simulate the moral consequences of policies, exposing hidden costs before they're enacted. This is not AI making morality for us. This is AI forcing us to grow up morally. So after all this, should we be scared of robot morality? Yes, but not in the Hollywood sense. Not because machines will rebel, but because they will obey too well. We should be scared of outsourcing too much, of building systems too rigid, of hiding behind machines to avoid responsibility. But we should also be hopeful, because if we do this right, AI could be the greatest moral teacher humanity has ever had, not by telling us what is right, but by showing us the contradictions, forcing us to face the choices we've avoided, and holding up a mirror to our flawed but evolving humanity. When Socrates stood before the court in Athens, he said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Maybe the gift of a high morality is that it forces us into examination. It makes our moral contradictions impossible to ignore. The question isn't whether machines will have morality. The question is whether we will finally have the courage to define ours. So don't just ask, should we be scared of robot morality? Ask, should we be scared of our own?